Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Cuyahoga County Public Safety and Justice Affairs Committee meeting of this October 18th, Game 5 of the ALDS preview for the World Series. Roll call, please.
As a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county YouTube page. Calling the roll for Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Ms. Conwell.
Present.
Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones is absent at the moment. Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. We have a quorum. And I'd also like to reflect for the record that Ms. Baker is also in attendance. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Baker. In front of you are the meeting minutes of September 20th. If they're in order, I'll accept a motion in a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Against? Thank you. 2022-0330.
Resolution 2022-0330, awarding a total sum not to exceed $225,000 to the West Shore Council of Governments for the West Shore Consolidated Dispatch Operational Plan from the District 1 ARPA Community Grant Fund.
And who do we have to speak? And I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Baker because we have some heavy hitters from the southwest side and the west side, so I think I'm going to let her handle this for me.
All right. Well, I certainly know the majority of audience that's out there right now. Mayor Clough, I think I saw you come forward. Mayor Bobes, Mayor Cooney, Mayor Kumar, thank you for attending. I know, and you have brought some support group to assist in this presentation, so we're anxiously looking forward to what you have brought us today. Come forward. Thank you. Please state your name and for the record.
I'm Dennis Clough. I'm the mayor of the city of Westlake, and I'm here on behalf of the West Shore Council of Governments to discuss a grant application that we're requesting up to $225,000 from ARPA funds to conduct a study by hiring a consultant to take a look at the possibility of establishing a West Side Consolidated Fire and Police Dispatch Center. We currently have a dispatch center that handles all the fire calls from the West Shore communities, the majority of West Shore communities. So we're looking to establish a West Side Police and Fire Consolidated. This consultant would have the responsibility of taking a look at 4 potential sites and establishing the criteria that would be needed to put together a dispatch center that would be equipped with the appropriate facility, appropriate equipment, as well as technology. Also looking at the potential rehabilitation, depending on the site that would be recommended. So we're looking for some additional funds to make sure that we get the appropriate information necessary to establish a police and fire consolidated dispatch center in the West Shore area. That's as simple as it gets.
That sounds pretty simple. Are there questions from the committee? Yes, ma'am.
Just wanted to know, Mayor, if this was the first of its kind, a consolidation.
In the West Shore area, when it comes to police and fire together, yes.
If I may.
Yes, ma'am.
I was there. It's hard to believe all those years have passed when we cut the ribbon for the St. John Medical Center, for that dispatch center. And here we are now consolidating even a broader umbrella. So it is certainly with my support that we consider the journey that these West Shore mayors have gone through in coming to the decision that a study was needed to make sure that this important venture that they are taking on is done correctly and is done appropriately in the right space, and also to get their arms around the cost. So I certainly support this. I know it's been a lot of discussion among all of them, including their police chiefs and fire chiefs, that have also engaged in this conversation, and I think it's the right step to make sure the right decisions are made.
Anything further? Well, Mayor, I could tell you, having been at the genesis of this earlier on, probably over 10 years ago now, we were lucky to have Mrs. Carney leading the way, and she's obviously been working with you and your other mayors and all the chiefs and whatnot. It's not only a good thing, it's a necessary thing. Cuyahoga County is far behind everyone else in the world when it comes to dispatch and 911. And it's about time that we get up to speed and people realize that. I think the consolidated dispatches that we have throughout the county now have proved the fact and all the naysayers wrong, that it can be done, that you can dispatch from the moon if necessary and get a police officer to my home in Strongsville or to your home in Westlake. The arguments are they're just arguments now at this point in time. So the proof's in the pudding, and I welcome the fact that you as mayors have led the charge to do this. I know it's a delicate issue in your communities, and the citizens themselves are very concerned about this as well. They should. But again, I think the services get better. I think the security of our safety forces is better. And I think all around, I think it saves money and lives. And I think that's been proved. And I look forward to what you do in the future in the southwest suburbs out there. I wish you the best of luck, and I'll accept a motion to move this forward. Yes, sir.
I would like to just commend my colleague, Ms. Baker, for bringing this collaborative piece of legislation forward, and to recognize my mayor from Lakewood, Mayor Megan George, and thank you for being with us today.
I'll accept the motion
I'll make the motion.
for Ms. Baker.
Second.
I'm not on the committee.
Right,
Oh,
I
I'm
was
sorry.
looking for her to make
that's
the
what I was
motion
looking
of her.
for, too.
I'm only a guest
I'm
today.
used to having her on my committee.
Let's do this. Do
Mr. Tuma.
I was like, this is you want to make a.
you want? What do you
Yes, sir. Mr. Tuma.
want? So I'll withdraw my motion so Ms. Baker can make the
But
motion.
she's not on the committee.
Well, she's not on the committee. Hey, listen, I tried. I'll make the motion. I'll make
Thank
the
you.
motion.
I have a
And I'll
motion and a second. Any further comment for Ms. Baker?
No, I think, Chair, you have expressed it very well, and I wish you all the best of luck, which I know luck is not part of this. It is really more of engaging and moving forward and getting the right decisions made. And when that study comes back, we will hear the results of that and have hopefully a West Shore dispatch center that will cover both police and fire to the best of the ability of that study. So let's move forward.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Thank you very much.
Thank you, and
Congratulations,
thank you
Mayor.
for your positive comments. And we are very proud of the fact that we were actually one of the first to establish a consolidated fire dispatch in the West Shore, and it's proved very productive and efficient. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Congratulations.
And Mr. Chair, for the record, if I could just confirm that is for second reading.
For a second reading,
Thank you. And I'd like to-
2022-0372.
And if I also may, let the record reflect that Mr. Miller has joined the meeting.
Right. Welcome, Mr. Miller.
Resolution 2022-0372, authorizing an amendment to contract number 2737 with Integrated Precision Systems Incorporated for maintenance and support on the Enterprise Network Security System for the period January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2022, to extend the time period to June 30th, 2024, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $869,156.66.
How you doing? Chris Costin, Sheriff's Department. What this is an amendment with our IPS contract for security around the county. We're asking for an extension for $869,000. Currently, we have we're working up on an RFP. That way, we don't have to do another amendment in 2024. So hopefully, this RFP goes out beginning of next year.
Questions? Hearing none, is there any necessity to move this forward? I see the dates are,
The current contract ends December 31st of this year. So yes,
so we have time, so we can go through the three readings. Okay, hearing no further questions, I'll accept a motion for Resolution 2022-0372 to the full council for second reading.
Make a motion, second on that.
Thank you. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Against?
Thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna take the hiring and promotion of personnel at sheriff's departments first. Thank you, Sheriff, for being here. A little background before you start, tell my colleagues. I'm thinking it's about a year ago, or maybe even a little bit less. I filed a complaint, or whatever it's called, with the Equity and Diversity division we have in the county. I haven't heard anything back, but my concern is that we weren't promoting minorities throughout the sheriff's department, COs, sheriffs themselves. I saw that during the discussions of the troubles that we were having getting anybody interested to come work in the jail, specifically the jail, but overall the services provided through the sheriff. I really haven't seen much movement. I've shared with you, Sheriff, the previous sheriff to that, and anybody who would listen, that I had a great concern. It's hard to get minorities to work in our facility if they're looking at their bosses who really don't look like them. I understand the delicate situation we have with qualifications and those that have to pass tests. I'm just wondering at this point in time what we have done, and it's been a short tenure for you, Sheriff, so it's almost not even a question for you. But what have we done? What is our plan moving forward? And where can we look to go in the near future? And when I say the near future, I really mean the near future, because again, if we're going into the communities in which a good portion of our inmates are from, they're looking for someone that looks like them. And if they get in there, and once again, now a CO is like a real career. It's now a real career because we're paying. How does that person say, well, I'd rather work in the jail and I can move up to be a sergeant or a lieutenant or possibly a captain? But when he's looking at those numbers and the individuals that are there, and nothing to take away from them, these are tough jobs, I get it. But what's our plan moving forward, moving our minorities through the system at a more rigorous pace, because it's just not getting done right now?
Thank you. Matter of fact, those of you who haven't met Sarah Nemistel, she's our Director of HR for the Sheriff's Department, and she can add to the conversation also. If you don't mind, I'd like to take a few minutes to give you a little bit of demographics on the Sheriff's Office. Right now, we're at a little over 1,000 employees, 1,077. We have currently 12 collective bargaining agreements. The department consists of 3 primary units: corrections, protective service officers, and law enforcement. In addition, we have several support departments such as court security, the clerk's office, and we also have employees assigned to the Crime Stoppers unit. Our staffing is as follows. We have 158 deputies, 94 protective service officers, 612 corrections officers. We have 1 active promotional list, and that's for sergeants. We have 3 executive level people on temporary work assignments, including myself, a captain, and a lieutenant. Current vacancies, obviously the sheriff's position is considered vacant. Chief deputy, captain, lieutenant, sergeant. We have 20 deputy openings. Corrections staff, we haven't done a real comprehensive workload assessment to determine the exact number, but I'd say somewhere between 40 and 50 right now because we're down to 612. We have 6 openings in the protective services unit, and I believe 1 opening for protective services sergeant. our challenges that you spelled out are hiring, recruiting, and retention. And some of the things we've worked on, we've reinstituted the lateral entry program, which gives us more flexibility. It's aside from the civil service process, we can bring over qualified individuals from other departments that are already.
When was that done?
I'm sorry?
When was that done?
It's been in effect for several years. Over the past couple of years, I guess it became a more vigorous operation, and they started utilizing it again. Internally, we actually conducted a survey with our staff, an anonymous survey, to find out what their thoughts were as to how we can improve the department, and that subject also came up on a couple of opportunities, recruiting, hiring. The things that we know we need to get better at. What we've also done on a minor level is we're trying to reinstitute the Explorer program. Some of our senior level staff members have come from the Explorer program. That's on a smaller level. I'll let Sarah expound on this cadet program that we're attempting to institute. The purpose of the program is to provide opportunities internally for members of our corrections staff and even our civilian staff to apply for a job as a deputy, and we will send them to training, pay for the academy, and pay them a salary while they're in the academy. That's probably our more. We're hoping that'll be our most promising program. Another thing that we've done in conjunction with the County Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program is we've developed a draft policy. The Sheriff's Department's developed a draft policy that we hope will enhance our ability to attract, recruit, and retain minorities and females, because they are, in some areas of the Sheriff's Department, they are underrepresented. And we just need to get better at it. There's no easy answers. These are all goals, all policies and plans that we like to implement to improve the diversity within the Sheriff's Department in all units. Right. So,
and I know it's a delicate dance because once we send them down, get them ready, Suburban, if not the Cleveland Police Department, comes in and swoops them up, and it's hard to maintain that. And I'm just wondering if it just comes down to dollars and cents, if that's what we need to talk about, or is it maybe that advancement in that career and the opportunity to move forward? And that's my main concern is the representation throughout the Sheriff's Department. I don't want to give someone a job just to give someone a job because of the color of their skin. I want them to earn that. But is there something, I'm wondering if we're missing at that beginning portion or at that recruiting portion, and maybe you can answer that further.
Before she even gets started, Councilman, I think some of it I can answer. Having gone through it when I started in law enforcement a long, long time ago, there were departments that I considered applying at, but I didn't think that I would feel comfortable in those departments. So I went to departments that were already representative of my classification. And everybody doesn't want to be a trailblazer. Some people feel more comfortable going to where, in their mind, they feel they're more accepted. We have to create an atmosphere in the county sheriff's department where people feel comfortable applying, comfortable transferring over from other departments. And that's internal. That's me, that's the staff. We just got to do a better job maybe of marketing. We're having these hiring events where we're sending our employees out to recruit. I think if we're persistent, I think that we will have some success. It's not going to be an overnight success story, but I think if we stay on top of it and we stick with what we started and stick with these programs, including the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program, including the Cadet Program that we're just getting off the ground, I believe we're going to have some success.
Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, Council. Sarah Nemistil. I was formerly in the Law Department, and now I'm the Administrator of Human Resources in the Sheriff's Department. Just to piggyback on what Sheriff said, I just want to say I'm very excited to be here and looking forward to working with each of you. I think recruitment is certainly a top priority within the department, but more so retention. I think one of my most important priorities is making our Sheriff's Department a place where employees truly feel job satisfaction, have the opportunity for promotion and development, and that we need to invest in employees more so they feel like they're growing with us and they want to stay and work with us as opposed to just bringing more employees in. So that's very important to me, and I think the cadet program is going to be great. So when I did the deputies contract last year, I think it was approved, we had a side letter that allowed us to hire academy or cadets, if you will, for $20 an hour, and then would put them through the academy and sponsor them. So we've been working on that in the background. We've talked to the PRC about how we do that in terms of a cadet classification. We're going to be putting out the bid for different institutions who will want to train our cadets and our academies. And so we're really excited about that. We think that'll be a nice bridge for our current employees to move up, and we're hoping to keep that internal. So it would be an opportunity just for our county employees.
And we also think it will help us with our retention of corrections officers because they'll have the opportunity to come in, and after a couple of years, they can take the exam for deputy, and there's some upward mobility. Besides, after a couple of years, they may decide that corrections isn't for them. This is a different option in law enforcement. They might want to stay in law enforcement, but just not in corrections.
Right. Questions for the sheriff or Sarah? Yes, sir.
Can you tell me how the formal qualifications to be a deputy might differ from that of the corrections officers or the civilian staff? Like, are there different educational requirements or anything else?
Yes, Councilman Miller. The qualifications are similar coming in. The training is different. The deputy training, I believe, is about 700 hours, and the CO training is about 240, somewhere in there. It's not as extensive. It's not as long. It's different. Obviously, the corrections training focuses on corrections, whereas the deputy training is you get a total academy training with firearms and everything, similar to, it's the same as a police academy. Just more hours, more training, more diverse training, a wider range of training.
I presume it includes training and supervision.
Not necessarily. That's separate.
That's separate, okay.
Yeah.
I'll just add that under the deputy classification, though, requires the candidates to already be sworn and have gone through the police academy before they're eligible to come in. So that's where the cadet program will come in, is we will be sponsoring the candidates through the program and helping them get their peace officer certification.
Yes, ma'am.
So just wanted to clarify. So this is something that you've actively been working on in terms of getting a succession plan for people to move up. Is that something that you started, or?
Yes, it's going to be brand new for the Sheriff's Department.
Thank you for bringing that.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Baker first.
Thank you. I know I'm not a member, so I appreciate the ability to ask. Also, for clarification, when you first started, you talked about the most promising program. Was that the cadet program? Can you please tell me what the most promising program was that you thought was really
The cadet program.
It was the cadet
Yes,
program.
yes.
That is what you're talking about.
I'm the most optimistic about that program as far as achieving what we need to achieve in diversity.
Good. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Miller.
So, maybe I misunderstood something, so I'd like a little clarification. Is the role of the deputies to supervise the correction officers, or is that not the case and they differ from the corrections officers in some other ways?
No, they're two separate units. Corrections are supervised by corrections sergeants and corporals and lieutenants, whereas the deputies are supervised by law enforcement sergeants, deputies, captains, and so forth. They're two separate units within the sheriff's department.
And do the deputies work inside the jail, or do they have other functions?
Seldom. We've had to use them on, I believe, before I started, I believe we had to use them on occasions, but typically they're not assigned to the jail.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. In Franklin, they don't have corrections officers, if I recall. They're Deputy 1, Deputy 2.
You're absolutely right.
Would that be an avenue we might want to look at? Because of, I think legally, the protection of a deputy is different than the protection of a CO.
We've had some discussions, not in-depth discussions. We haven't brought it up during labor management meetings with the either union. So I don't want to give the wrong impression that we're attempting to do something that we haven't spoken with the unions about. But
just spitballing here.
Yeah,
People get a little nervous, but it just seems that, thinking outside the box is probably not a bad thing at times to do.
I think Franklin and Summit and some other counties also do that.
Yeah. Well, the purpose of being here today was the concern that I have, and I think my colleagues share, is as we move forward into what I consider to be very interesting times, not just in correction, but in the world itself. Are we ready for it, and are we preparing for that? And not that it has to be said, but I think it's important to be said that anything that you would need, your staff would need, the county council certainly is standing with you and are a source or a resource for you for anything you might need to make this mission more easily accomplished. So I appreciate you being here. I understand the difficulty and the delicacy that we're dealing with in personnel and maintaining those personnel. But it just seems to me it's important that we keep this on the front burner and to start moving people forward in that career path.
Thank you, and I just want the council to know that it's as more important to us than it is to anybody that we have success with this program.
Ms. Baker.
Just as a snapshot, which you started at the top of your presentation, listing how many of those we have in different positions. Where are you in the correction officers? How many do you have at this moment? Is it 600 and something?
612 I have as of this morning.
And what is the goal that you would like to see?
Somewhere 650 or above.
650
we
or
like to
above.
see.
So we are moving in a much better direction than we were.
Yes.
Yes. So we still have a little ways to go, but I agree. Anything, at least, that we can do as county council to support you and your efforts, I'm with you, Chair, on that, and I'm sure all of our council members are together with that. So good luck on continuing what you're doing, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Sheriff,
Yep, one more. Have enough.
sorry, slow. Oversight for the diversity, I'm assuming that's Director Lockett and her department assisting you on that. But in terms of oversight for jail contracts and oversight for the sheriff's office, do you have a specific position held for someone that is looking at those contracts? And we need more oversight in other various county departments. The way HHS is set up, they have that. They have to have checks and balances when we write a contract. There's different people that are assigned for that oversight, and to make sure when we talk about oversight can be big, but making sure that the deliverables and all that is obtained. This little birdie told me that maybe that's not happening in the other departments throughout the county. So while you were up here, I just wanted to make sure that if you have that already in place, and if not, how could you move toward having that in place?
We don't have one particular person over the contracts. There's so many of them, as I indicated, but we try to ensure compliance, if that's your question, with our labor management meetings. We have regular labor management meetings with members of the union, their representatives, and management on a regular basis.
Not all of them are not all your employees are in the collective bargaining units, though, are they?
You know,
Majority are?
yeah, the majority are.
Okay. Well, we still need oversight. So
Yeah.
just take, for example, food contract. So who is monitoring and making sure that the deliverables are met? And that's just one little small caveat, but that's something that I would like to see the other departments in the county move toward, to be able to identify. There's a lot of things. You could find out services aren't being met. Things aren't being, so
We have an opening for a contract monitor. We haven't.
that's
filled
what
it.
we need.
Yeah.
And so that's the title of that. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's what I want.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, as most of us are aware, last Tuesday was a very important meeting of the steering committee. And there was a presentation by the DLZ Architecture Group at that meeting. And I thought it important that you be brought up to speed as to that presentation, what was said, some of the questions that they answered. And the bottom line was could the existing jails be rehabbed and redone? Which for 3 years we were told it couldn't, but because of some members of the committee thought that it should have been looked at, not yet again, but 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. So 4 times was going to be the magic. So we authorized through the Board of Control a $150,000 contract to DLZ. Everybody's got letters. DLZ to do that task and then present. So I thought it was important that, again, I know many of you are up to speed, but to hear what was said and where we went after that, we all know. But I think this probably closes the chapter on the jail for us. So for your edification, gentlemen.
Mr. Chair, before we start, if I may call the roll for Ms. Simon, who joined us earlier?
Oh, sure, thank you.
Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to present our findings from the independent review of the Jail 1 and Jail 2. I am Eric Gratz. I'm a principal architect at DLZ. Elliot Allen is a senior project manager / structural engineer at DLZ. We've both been there over 23 years, and this is something that we look at every day of our careers, something that we do. And I'd like to go through just a little bit about DLZ, and if there's any point in time you have questions, please let us know. At DLZ, we are a full-service architectural engineering firm, planning firm, based out of Columbus, Ohio, with 28 other offices throughout the Midwest, a little over 800 employees. We do have a local office here, as well as down in Akron, over in Toledo, Cincinnati, as well as other states as well. We are an MBE. Primarily, our chairman has been chairman since 1978. Something that we're very proud of with that. This is what we do, and I think that if you look at the third page, you're going to see that DLZ historically over the last decade or so, we've been ranked the #1 correctional design firm in the Midwest by Engineering News Record. We've done a lot of master plans, a lot of studies, a lot of jail designs, a lot of improvements on projects, as well as a lot of new ones. And I think one thing just to note, as I noted last week at the steering committee on Tuesday, is we did a very, very similar study for Wayne County, Michigan, which is Detroit. Wayne County was looking at what do we do with our 3 county jails. two downtown, one on the northeast or northwest side, as well as our Hall of Justice. And we reviewed all of those to help them to make the decision very similar. Should we renovate? Should we expand? Or should we build new? Very different situation of what their buildings are, all spread out and different things, but ultimately, we did the study, someone else, they did a design build, another firm, but they went through and they actually did replace all their facilities. Just to let you know, we've done something very similar with that. The other thing, I know that you just mentioned Franklin County. I am the architect of record for the new Franklin County project. I started back in 2009 with a facility assessment, an operational analysis of what they were doing with their downtown facility, as well as Jackson Pike. And it's something that ultimately they led through to design a new facility, which is by the National Institute of Correction is considered a center of innovation that all counties across the country should go and take a look at. So I'm going to walk through, and Elliot will talk about himself here in a minute when he starts talking, but I want to go through and just be very clear on what our study scope was. Is that there were 9 steps that you can see, and I won't go through all of these, but there were 9 steps, and we were very specific to make sure that we stayed in our lane and we reviewed what was asked for us as we went through it. And I do believe that it was a very comprehensive list of requirements for DLZ to go through and to look at very specifically Jail 1, Jail 2. We were not asked to look at the new site or we were asked to look at the program, but if the program was right for the new site. We were very specifically what we need to do on Jail 1 and Jail 2. So I just want to make that very clear from the outpost with that. We interviewed a lot of people, and you're going to see that here in a couple slides. And I will be very honest and upfront with you. I sat in every single interview. I led the interviews. Some of them lasted for over 3 hours. They were very good. I will honestly say no one tried to sway us one way or the other, and I want to be crystal clear with that, is it truly was an independent review of what we came up with for our actions. And I take that very personal with that because that was the direction to us, and I believe that everyone on the receiving side or on the helping side was also very clear with that. We spent time walking through the existing facilities, which Elliot's going to talk about here in a few minutes. And then we also interviewed all the architects and the engineers that have been involved over the last, since 2014 and even before that. So flipping on over to page 7, and I think that this is really the essence of what we believe was our scope of work and what we did. One was to do the assessment of Jail 1 and 2. And then there were 3 questions, and you're going to hear me talk about the 3 questions throughout our presentation. 1, can we renovate Jail 1 and Jail 2 in kind? And what I mean by that is, can we replace security electronics? Can we replace doors and hardware? Can we upgrade the showers? Can we replace the HVAC, the plumbing, the electrical stuff in the building with very similar things to what's already there? Second question, and we'll talk about the answers here in a minute. Second question, can we bring the building up to date as far as the Ohio building codes as well as the Ohio jail standards? And then thirdly is, from a direction that the steering committee voted on 12-0, is looking at the jail goals and objectives for a new building. If you would build a new building, these are our goals and objectives. And on this page, I just noted 2028 because by the time you design the building, you build the building, you do a transition, you do your occupancy, you may be 5 years out. So I looked at it as projecting out a little bit, but those were what the goals and objectives were from that point of view. You're going to see a lot of words on page 8 here. These are all the folks that we met with. It's very clear that we wanted to document everyone we met with, almost every one of them, except for the architects and the engineers that we met with, who were all from across the country. Every other thing was in-person meetings. And it was important for us to do that for obvious reasons. You know, we had some very heart-to-heart discussions of just the overall operations of the existing facility with the sheriff and others of his staff. And that was important to know from the user groups why the facility does work in some areas and why there needs to be some improvements in some other areas. So if you have any questions about any of those things, who we met with, we're more than open to addressing any of them.
Mr. Chair, if this is a good time, I do have a question about those interviews. If you could, what specifically did you receive in terms of information from the prosecutor, the administrative judge Sheehan, and the public defender Cullen Sweeney? What did they add to your report?
The very first thing that they said repeatedly is make sure that this is an independent review. Is you're not working for anyone, is that this needs to be your decision. And they were adamant about that information as we walk through the process. They did recommend us to meet with some of the people that are on the list. They said, hey, we'd like for you to add some more people to the list such that you understand more things about it. For an example, the former county jail administrator, the former county architect. They said, we'd like for you, these people were here for decades. They understand the building. We want you to meet with them. But at no point in time did they say, thou shalt only renovate this building and not move somewhere else. They never said that once.
Did they express an opinion on whether the existing jail 1 and 2 should be renovated?
I think that in a roundabout way, they understand that the building needs a lot of work. They understand that even from their goals and objectives that it would be tough to do that. But I do not believe personally that they ever said, this building must be renovated. We cannot go build a new jail. They never said that.
Did anyone you interviewed express an opinion about a preference that the jail 1 and 2 be renovated?
One person was very strong that the building should be renovated.
And who was that?
That was the former county architect.
Okay.
And what's his name? Yeah.
Was that Burr Shakarian?
Yes. Yeah, Burge. Yeah, I met him out at, yes, he was very strong opinion that he felt that the, Burge thought that the building should be renovated.
Yeah, how long's he been retired?
We didn't get into the very specifics on
Since
that.
Christ was a corporal. Yeah, I think that was on his watch, or a good portion of it was on his watch, but regardless, anybody has any questions, just jump in.
Just one more. And who would have expressed an opinion that the jail should not be renovated and that it would make sense to build a new jail?
I don't think that anyone was, in my meetings, if anyone expressed concerns, it probably would have been 1 or 2 of the architectural firms that have already completed reviews of the building that came to their own conclusions, that through years of, documentation, working on the project, their professional opinions were that they believe that the building should be, to meet the goals and objectives, to meet everything that was wanted to be done, they felt that a new facility would be better.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have one question, if I
Yes,
may.
ma'am.
Just for clarification, if I'm asked, on the very first bullet, Wednesday, July 27, 2022, you have both bullets with some of the same people. Why is it that we would have Greg Popovich in the first bullet and the second bullet for in-person, along with several others that seem to be duplicated? Were they at different times, or?
Yeah, they were at different times. We had a meeting, a kickoff meeting with Michael Dever and Cole and others from Public Works, that some of the folks that were mentioned also in the first bullet point, they were asked to just be in a kickoff meeting. It was just to explain the overall process. During that meeting, it was a decision that was made to then meet with the prosecutor and public defender and presiding judge to give them a very similar update of what the overall process was going to be. That's why we met with both of them. Separate meetings. I think one was at 9:30 and one was like 11:30 on the same day.
So both of sets of people were in both meetings, is what you're saying?
The people that are listed for each meeting attended the meetings, yes.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the cost of a new building was a major concern in one of these issues, why was it determined in your study costs for renovations weren't covered?
It was not required in our scope of work.
No, but
I
from your opinion, I mean, doesn't, if people, one of the major concerns from the public and from whoever inside thought that we shouldn't have a jail because of the money and what we're going to spend on a future jail, if you're comparing the two, wouldn't it be relevant to know how much the actual renovations that were proposed?
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. I think that
I just can't, I find it hard that they didn't ask you guys to do that.
the proposal or the request for proposal did not ask for any kind of conceptual designs, nor did it ask for any type of staffing analysis, nor did it ask for any type of cost estimating. As I noted early, we tried to stay very specific.
Well, you
within our
should.
scope
You
of work is our requirement. So,
But for the issues, or let me just ask that question, was it ever, other than what Councilwoman Simon asked, that the only thing that those three expressed was make sure this is an independent review, a review of what? What were they looking to get from you?
Was that the initial, what the committee was requesting?
No,
They would know that.
yeah, no, the three that asked for the independent review.
I'm hoping we get into that.
Okay.
Because like I said, this is, I believe, the fourth review. And after 2020, in November, the questions you're asking were answered, and the committee voted 12-0 to forget it. So for 2 years, it was run silent, run deep on redoing those jails. I've been very vocal publicly saying that this was nothing but a tactic to delay, which I stand by and will debate anybody publicly in this forum and be right. But didn't you find it rather odd that after reviewing all that, that you were even asked to do this?
wasn't my decision for that.
Didn't you find it, have you ever had a committee such as that and a project such as this, having reviewed all of that for 2 solid years, made a final decision, and then at the last minute come back and say, I want to look at that again?
Well, Wayne County, Michigan, Detroit had started construction on their new building, on their new jail, and they stopped construction for us to do our study.
Was
So
that,
they were much further along than what you guys are.
so they started?
They had actually started, they had precast cells 6 levels high,
Yeah.
and they stopped construction.
Right. That was a deal with Gilbert,
There were a lot of different scenarios, but yes.
where they got
That
the
was all.
property?
There were many scenarios in that.
Yeah, I read where they got the property from Gilbert for a trade, and it worked out really nice for them, it seems, because the facility seems to be working well. But anyhow, and questions seem to be going, all these people asking you different questions. Have you ever had a happenstance on building a jail? And how many have you done?
We've worked on over 150 jail projects.
Have you ever had a public defender, prosecutor, administrative judge, retired architect for 20 years, having questions like this?
Every county is different. There's a lot of questions in every place, but,
So
everyone's,
that answer would be no.
there's always a lot of questions by a lot of people.
We are unique here. We are unique. I don't want to.
There's, every county's unique in their own ways.
Okay.
So,
But it just seemed odd, but we'll further delve into that, so if you continue
okay,
on.
sure.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just a comment and a question. First, a comment that we heard some people say in public comment that the jails could be renovated for as little as $100 million. And to my mind, the whole question of comparative cost is significant. And so I would just say that I'm surprised that helping to nail down a better estimate on the cost of renovation was not part of the scope of work. And the question I have is regarding the chart that we have in front of us with the average daily population. The number that I've heard over and over again is 1760, and so it says on the chart here, ODRC reports 1,880 rated beds, and so I'm wondering if you can shed any light on what accounts for the discrepancy between that 1760 number that I've heard reported over and over again and the number that you have here.
So thank you very much.
Before you answer
yes,
that,
sir.
I just want to tell everybody to be very careful on dollars and cents, because I've been on a committee 3 years and I've never heard $100 million. Never heard that. But if you go to November 2020 meeting, dollar figures were put out and they were around 340, something like that, if I remember correctly. Those do not add up today because of time.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, the number that I referred to was not said officially. It was said in public comment, and
The individuals in public comment had no knowledge whatsoever.
And so I had great deal of concern about it, and I had some sense that we were doing the review study to somewhat answer what people were saying in public comment, and that therefore the question of relevant cost would be relevant. That's where I was going with that.
I would be very careful with, if we're going to study everybody with public comment, we will get nothing done. There was disinformation, misinformation, purposeful and not purposeful. I had to sit here and listen to that, and we can't respond to the public. But many of those people would literally tell you they didn't want a jail ever. They would also tell you they don't want a prosecutor. They would tell you they don't want judges. So they're kind of skewed in what they were saying, and that they were purposely, in my opinion, at times saying low numbers, thinking that that could be redone. It can't be redone. In 2020, go to the meeting, it's on record, and I think the first time that anybody mentioned any costs, and those were loose costs, it was like 340, and if we could, we'd lose half our beds, and it was just a mess. And not calculated in, was what do you do with prisoners while you're redoing it? Which later on in your presentation we'll discuss, which is another cost that wasn't calculated in. So it became what some people wanted it to become, a smeared mess.
So, Mr. Chairman, you know that I totally share your opinion that the jail cannot be renovated. I did not even support the review study because I thought it was a decided issue. But nevertheless, I did feel that the question of well, what would it cost to renovate the jail as opposed to what it would cost to build new was one of the issues that was salient in the public discussion and was somewhat of a motivator, but maybe not.
Yeah, well, I can't get into the hearts and minds of people, but I can only tell you what I witnessed, and what I witnessed was a purposeful attempt to dislodge the committee from getting to an end goal. And successful they were. And congratulations. And like I said, they're wizards. They turned a $550 million jail into a $1 billion jail, and it's going to be more. And I'm the only one on record, and they won't challenge me because I'll bring them in here and we'll get to the bottom of it. It is what it is. Now we have to deal with it. New administration has to deal with it. So if you would carry on with where
Absolutely.
you're at,
Sure.
and
Mr.
we'll we got a lot to talk about.
Mr. Chairman, I still do want a response from them on 1880 versus 1760.
I think
That's the
they're here.
next thing up, sir.
Okay.
Okay, so back on August the 22nd, whenever I met with the County Jail Administrator, Rhonda Gibson, one of the things that I had requested was just some information for our own sake, and there was some reasons for it, but I was wanting to know what the average daily population was. Okay, and I'm going to go back and forth between two pages here, pages 8 and 9. So she, working with the IT staff for the county, they were able to give me the average daily population. And what we did was we calculated it in all of our spreadsheets and stuff, and we created on page 9. One of the questions I asked her was, what is the rated bed capacity? And she said, as we all know, through the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, ODRC, and the Bureau of Adult Detention, more specifically, BAD establishes what your rated bed capacity is. So and she mentioned, she said, I believe that it's 1880. Okay, so then fast forwarding, on the 30th of August of 2022, I met with Bureau of Adult Detention down in Columbus on the west side on Fisher Road, and I met with John Adams, who's the Bureau Director, Melissa Hunt, who is the Assistant Bureau Director for Northern Ohio, Scott Felicki, who's for the Southern Ohio, and then Christopher Darlington, who is from the Bureau of Adult Detention. He's really much more about the nuts and bolts of what the jail standards are. And John Adams, they know your facility very well. Okay, just be very clear, they know your facility well. They're here a lot. They try to help all they possibly can. And John noted that it is 1,880 beds. He goes, that is what Bureau of Adult Detention notes as the rated bed capacity. And I just very frankly asked him, I said, I know that over the course of the last several years, you know, they've relocated the kitchen, there's been some intake booking changes, and he goes, we look at this is that the rated bed capacity of the jail 1 and jail 2 combined is 1,880. End of discussion. So that's where that number came from the Bureau of Adult Detention. And they are the ones, none of the counties in Ohio or any of the other states note, they do not determine the rated bed capacity. It is usually a Department of Correction or the Bureau of Adult Detention that sets what that number is when they do their inspections. So that's where that came from. So what we did is, I was curious for my part, because if we potentially might renovate the building, how full is the jail? And that was the whole essence, really nothing any more than that, but I wanted to look at this. So if we have 1,880 beds, what jails across the country they try to do, and it's all really established by the National Institute of Corrections, which is a subsidiary of the Bureau of Prisons for the federal government. Great resource. If you ever need to reach out to get a lot of just free information, the NIC is that. And what they do is they recommend that jails are at 80% occupancy of the rated bed capacity, 80%. And why is that? Because a jail obviously can operate at 100%, some more than that. But at the 80%, the NIC notes that jails can remain safe and secure. Operationally, they can still do their classification. They can separate the different types of inmates, whether prey, predator for a couple of terms, or just some different needs in the facility. They recommend that 80% is the number. Also, if you have a peak arrest, annual or admissions into the facility, you then are also able to absorb a fraction of that 20%, still keeping it below 100%. So what we did is the red horizontal line that goes across is 1,880 beds. And then the red shaded represents below the 1880, that 20%, which would get you down to, per what the NIC, which most any architect that designs jails at all, we look at it as 80%. And that 20% factor at the bottom is the 1504, is that if you were really following the NIC standards and the recommendations of what most jails do, is that your population would be at the lower end of that red shaded box. From my point of view is that we were looking at this as if we were going to renovate the building, is how many inmates might we need to move to be able to get below the 80%, and then how many more we might need to move at any point in time to do some renovation of some floors. So that's what it was. The three different columns is the darkest blue is the total inmates, the light blue is the male inmates, and the light green is the female inmates.
May I ask a question on that, Chair? So just so I understand, the 1880 rated beds, that is what exists today?
Bureau of Adult Detention rates jail 1 and jail 2 as 1880 as your rated bed capacity.
In order for us to meet and you might get into this, and if you do, I'll wait, but in order to meet the state standards of what now, if we were to renovate anything, the size of the cells, all the other conditions, the lighting, all these different things that we've heard, that if we start renovating, we would have to comply.
That is correct.
What would that take our rated bed capacity down to?
That gets into programming, gets into design. Again, unfortunately, that was not in our scope of work to do that.
Well, outside of programming and design, though, I would think there would be an anticipated number of how many cells you would have to enlarge, which would reduce the capacity of the beds, outside of programming.
So I'll use it, and we do talk about that a little bit, but I'll address one of your questions at this point in time, is when we look at an individual cell, is that individual cell now was initially designed for one bed. A second bed was added at some point in time over the last 46 years. And it does not meet the square foot requirements established by the Ohio jail standards. So if we have a housing unit that has 24 beds, 12 two-man cells, it is not as simple as to say, if there's 12 cells that don't meet the square foot requirements, we're going to take 12 beds out, because we can make some of them bigger. So the questions is, do we make it bigger where they still stay two-man cells? Do we make it where they're three-man cells? Do we make it where it's four-man cells? That really drives what a decision on how many beds that you might lose. You know, one of the solutions potentially to meet some of your goals and objectives is to increase more daylighting in the air into the housing units. It might require removing 3 or 4 cells, creating vast, wide light that comes into the cells. I don't know the answer to that. I just know that renovating the building, John Adams, the Bureau of Adult Detention Director, was very clear, if not just your county, but any county, if you're going to go in, do a renovation of the building, you must meet the current Ohio jail standards. And meeting the Ohio jail standards today, you would lose capacity because you don't have the square footage for the beds in the cells.
And what capacity that is, you cannot tell us.
No, because honestly, it really gets in again to how big of cells might you want? Could you go to dorm style cells? There's a lot of what ifs. I just know that the number would go down. But to what? That was not part of our scope of work.
As experts in this world, this small world, ballpark, what would the cost be to redo an 1880 47-year-old jail facility in Northeast Ohio, cutting cells down to whatever is necessary? Are we at 400 million? We had 500 million? Because Mr. Miller raises the question. We have people in the audience who, sadly, were picking numbers out of the sky. I go back to the 2020 meeting where I believe it was 340, and I don't know if I can't even recall if that was just jail 1 and do something with jail 2, because we looked at all these, as you know, because it's there, it's on the video. But it seems the hard thing to pin down here is cost. And I do know cost of renovating is way higher than building new. And if building new is at that time 550, and now today, most likely $1 billion, ballpark it for me what we're looking at to redo a 50-year-old facility, losing cells and getting up with all the bells and with everything that the committee asked for. 12-0. This is what we want in our jail, so it has to be in there. There's no compromises, because I know when I watched the previous meeting, you're like, well, there's compromise. Nope, no compromises. Everything. It's got to be over $1 billion, no?
I would say, just in the two numbers that's been thrown out, the $100 million and the $340 million, from a very, very high level of magnitude, I think that the higher number that was noted would be much more in line with a level of magnitude than what the lower number is. Now, I think that number, through some preliminary design, conceptual design, you could get a much more realistic number. But I think just in past experience for building this size, I mean, one's 10 operational levels, one's 9. That's an awful lot of building to renovate for $100 million.
Which is, and I believe your estimate was 5 years.
5 to 8 years, yes.
5 to 8 years, moving 300 inmates from that facility to other holding facilities daily at $100 inmate, and I'm going low.
Good.
Over a 5-year period.
Define the beds first.
Is about $57 million, not calculated in to the almost 400 million, and not getting the bells and whistles that the committee had insisted upon without compromise. Because your testimony was compromise. So they're not willing to compromise. Not that they matter anymore as far as I'm concerned, but it seems to me that and that was 2 years ago. So I'm taking the two year ago number of 550. Well, if I got almost a $60 million movement of people for 5 years on a $430 million allegedly at that point in time project, we're again at $1 billion today. I'd just like to congratulate everybody that got us here. Continue on. Sarcasm noted.
One more question, please.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, to the representatives, can you give me a number on the number of cells in jail 1 and 2 as opposed to the number of beds?
I don't have it in front of me, but we could get that information for you.
Okay.
I just don't, that's just not a number. I just don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, real quick. Yes, sir. Yeah, so I certainly appreciate the chairman trying to get some figure on a renovation, since it's just to me that the work that you were commissioned to do, you did an excellent job of what you were asked to do. But to me, it's just kind of like, you're going on vacation, you hire a travel agent, you don't ask what the cost is of the itinerary that's put together. It just makes no sense to me to anybody who's reasonably trying to find out whether or not you should renovate or get a new jail. So I just don't quite understand that. So ultimately, I'm trying to find the objective of what your guys' goal was from those who hired you. It was to...
3 questions.
Okay.
Very clearly.
Yes.
3 questions. Can we renovate the building in kind?
Okay.
Okay. 2, can we meet the jail standards and the current building codes? 3, can we renovate the building, including jail standards, including the building code, and meet the goals and objectives that were voted on by the steering committee?
Okay. And in no part of that was there a should we? Because, I mean, can we? I mean, can we get to the moon? Yes, probably. Should we? I'm trying to find out, where they were trying to go with this entire process. And the work you did was really good work. And I'm just, perplexed as to...
Your final conclusion was, no, it's...
We can do 1, we can do 2, but to do all of 1 and 2, plus meet your goals and objectives, it's not practical and it's just not probable.
Okay. All right. So in conclusion,
That's the end of our
Ultimately.
presentation.
That's the last.
But
I'm
are we
sorry.
done?
Yeah, well, we can all go home now. No. We'll get to that.
Sure,
I should
sure.
let you get to that, but it was just perplexing. I was thinking about it, and I'm thinking, you just in simplest terms, you were asked to do something without, I think, a major component, what it is we're trying to do. It just makes no sense to me, but, okay, thank you.
As you probably felt, and I've watched that meeting a number of times in your testimony, you had four corners in which to look at. And you were dragged, unbeknownst to you or unbeknownst to you, I don't know, outside the four corners and then brought back in. And at times you stayed inside the four corners saying, it's outside our scope. And then at times, some of our friends on the committee dragged you outside that four corners and to probably their benefit, their position, whatever that may be. I've spent 3 years of my life on that committee and don't understand a single thing but $1 billion. $1 billion. But your conclusion after all of this dragging, moving, and work that you did, the conclusion was, yeah, you can do anything, but you can't do that realistically. Which my contention is, we knew that in 2019. And the review that you made of all of our meetings in 2019, 2020, 2014, all those conclusions, to anybody that paid attention, and I would argue to people that didn't pay attention, the conclusion was, especially with Jail 1, it's done. It's done. Anybody that walks in there knows it's done. Then there's the argument for Jail 2. And it's really not a good argument. And the reason I know that is because of 2014, 2019, 2020, all the meetings, all the votes, other than one individual throughout, and then he backed off in 2020 and voted for the new jail, and then 2 years later asked for a $150,000 review, which is why we're here today, trying to figure out, and evidently trying to get into their heads why they dragged you from the four corners, outside the four corners, got you back in, and played this table tennis with $1 billion project now that they didn't think was $1 billion, that they thought was 550, that moved to 750, and that's okay because they don't write the check. That's our responsibility. But I digress. If you'd continue on here, and I know actually the daily population kind of went outside the four corners, but I see where you're trying to get to, because you're like, hey, where are we going to put these people? Sure. And what are we going to build for? But go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, if the population had been 800, there'd been a lot of empty beds, and we may not have had to move people, so
Right.
we wouldn't have addressed that. So one of the things, and I know that there's been a lot of questions from different information, but again, this on page 10, this is all data that was very specifically provided by the county IT and the sheriff's office from the administration side. So one of the other things that we always look at is just from a curiosity point of view, that really did not have, thanks, Elliot, that just information from ourselves on this was the average length of stay. And what the average length of stay is just that, is you go on vacation, do you stay a week? Do you stay 2 weeks? Do you stay a month? It's the same thing with inmates that are in custody, is we look at what the average length of stay is at any given time. So what we did was, just like with the average daily population, we picked a day that went all the way back to 2013. We picked August 29th. Arbitrarily picked a date. There was no rhyme or reason with that, but we looked at it, and based on the days, based on those days since 2013, is just looked at what the average length of stay was. And what I will note is that the parameters of how they ran the reports are the same every year. Okay? When I look at this, the average length of stay numbers are high compared to other counties, but again, they ran the same parameters on every year, which is an important note to make. Okay?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I see that average length of stay increased post-COVID. Do we know what a factor would have been for that? Could it be a change to the administrative judge, perhaps, that,
There can be a lot of what-ifs.
so do we know, Mr. Chair, when the the current administrative judge became administrative judge versus the preceding? That's something I would like to know.
I'm not certain, but it had to have been at least 19 because he was
Okay.
he was in 19.
I see.
And I will maybe help you out here.
Okay.
It was brought up at the meeting by the prosecutor, kind of a dig, why bring the Cleveland prisoners in? And I thought about it, and I thought, well, that's a reasonable argument. And then I thought, well, if you're bringing Cleveland prisoners in, they don't stay for but 3, 4, 5 days. So your average length of stay by bringing them in helps that number out, brings it down, not up. Because if they're in there, picked up off the street, dropped off at the jail for 3, 4, 5 days, and then let out for, on bond or whatever, they're not in there for a high felony or anything like that. That number is going to be helped out by the Cleveland prisoners. So in a very odd way, having the Cleveland prisoners in there helps the average length of stay number to come down. So maybe we should, and maybe we'll pay you to do that, is remove the Cleveland prisoners and let's get a real number for the average length of stay in the jail. Just throwing something out there. Maybe I'm wrong. Don't think I am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the Cleveland prisoners are misdemeanants often as well, and that's why the length of stay would be shorter.
Right.
Okay.
May I ask a quick question just on the,
Yes, ma'am. And I will
Clarification.
caution, we have to be out here at 3.
just real quick, just so I understand, it's probably an error on my part for not understanding it. The blue is male, the green is female, black is all.
That is correct.
So wouldn't all be a higher bar if you're combining the two together?
No, you can, on daily population, yes. Average length of stays, no, because the numbers can vary on the average length of stay. So
Okay,
it's not it is the average length. It's not a summation.
right?
It is the average of what the males are, the average of the female, and then you take the average of overall.
Okay.
So
I maybe
it's
asked
different
that.
than population. Population, you would add the two together.
Good, thanks for the clarification.
So as Eric indicated earlier, my name is Elliot Allen. I'm with DLZ. I've worked with DLZ for 23 years, began one of my first projects as a correctional facility. So I've spent some time in facilities in running project management as an engineer quite often. As we go into any project of any type that's a renovation project, we are going to go out and spend time in that building. In this case, we spent our time in jails 1 and 2 with our engineers and our architects, split into 2 groups. The county's personnel attended in both those groups to get us into the spaces that we needed to. Fortunately, we were able to access what we needed to, except for some areas that were still dealing with some COVID at the time. Graciously, they let us around for 2 days from the top to the bottom, inside and out, intake booking, the basement, the roof, various areas for medical as well as day rooms to gain an appreciation for what the facility is and the current conditions of it, as well as how it operates from a day-to-day basis. So with any renovation project, we go through and with some very specific goals ultimately, looking at how we can upgrade the building finishes, upgrade the building systems, which would be mechanical, electrical, plumbing, in this case, security electronics, and other elements that build into those systems. We also want to look at the ability to make and incorporate current design trends and state-of-the-art of the current design of the community that's out there. And I'll speak a little bit about those in a little bit. And then finally, we want to address and look at how constructible things are going to be with this. At the end of the day, your facility and facilities this type would fall into what we would consider a major renovation project. We would be looking at extensive interior renovation due to the fact that much of it is smaller spaces than what we would approach today, from a design standpoint, because we try to build in some of that ability for maintenance long-term and daily maintenance for that matter. Some of the particular elements that we would need to address, or that would need to be addressed on this facility in dealing with structural specifically, are some issues with some of the deterioration in the concrete that's in the parking garage, as well as some of the exterior envelope. Currently, both of those are in plan to be addressed at this point in time, but those are major items that could be life safety issues, as you may be aware of. Some of the other new systems that, when I was speaking to current design trends, that we would want to incorporate that would make the jail function much better, as well as address long-term water usage and electric and so on, would be water management. We'd also want to see cleanouts incorporated. Cleanouts help on a daily basis from inmates trying to clog toilets and having overflow. Sprinkler system, currently the facility does not have sprinkler systems in it, does not have intercoms that are functioning or in both the jails, and security electronics are lacking in both of them. Moving on to the constructability. I spoke a little bit about this earlier. The Jail 1 and specifically, Jail 2 as well, but Jail 1 specifically, at the time that it was designed primarily to house inmates. So we didn't think of design that would incorporate some of that ease of access for maintenance on a day-to-day basis as a facility like this is needed. Due to that, you would be working and opening up all of the concealed spaces behind ceilings as well as walls, which makes this much more complicated. Occupancy of Jail 1 and 2, if you're thinking about a major renovation, well, as you guys had indicated earlier, we have to either do something with the inmates intermittently with the areas that you're renovating, which means relocating them or putting them in housing somewhere else, which you have to find those locations to do that. Or, as we were thinking of, because we've had several discussions due to the fact that, we're thinking of this as a renovation type project, what do you do in this situation? So we thought of a couple of ideas, just simply from our standpoint, to think of it as that type of renovation. And maybe instead of moving people, you build something located there on the site where the current police station headquarters is at. Maybe that goes away. But another item could possibly be to remove mechanical equipment and spaces out of the current Jail 1 and 2, put them in what we call a central utility plant, which is a CUP. So those services, one, would be moved outside of the secure perimeter, which helps out some of that daily maintenance, and then access for outsiders be going in and out of the jail. So those are some items that we also thought of. You also had the idea of some of those larger pieces of equipment, a little bit more efficient to operate long-term, being housed in a central utility plant. And they're just a little bit simpler to maintain overall. As part of our review also, we thought about some of the building codes. Since the time that the Jail 1 and Jail 2, for that matter, have been put in place, or the current building code has been put in place, we've had the adoption of ADA, and that making it accessible to all spaces. And that's a major component that would have to be addressed as part of any renovation project that's going to have to take place. In addition to that, as you guys were talking about earlier, there are certain jail standards that we're going to need to meet, which Eric is going to further allude to.
So just and I'm going to combine just for the sake of time here just a little bit, but as I noted, we did meet with the ODRC, Bureau of Adult Detention. We do all the time. We do a lot of correctional work, detention work here in Ohio, and we're very accustomed to these standards. In fact, we have helped them update some of their standards to meet more of some of the things that we do in jails today. But very specifically, the folks that really kind of over your facilities, John Adams, who's the Bureau Director, as well as Melissa Hunt, as I mentioned earlier, she's the Assistant Bureau Administrator for Northern Ohio, and then Chris Darlington. The one name I did mention earlier, Scott Flicky, who's the Southern Assistant Bureau Administrator, has been around ODRC for many, 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 many years, and he's just a fantastic resource, and he was involved in our meeting. But it was very clear that when we met with the Bureau of Adult Detention, which is something that I would highly recommend that you engage on anytime you have any design meetings, planning meetings, invite them to your meetings. It is something that is in your best interest because they are here to help you. This is my public service announcement for them, but it is something that is, as you see on page 20, there's the planning approval process. We call it the PAP. There's 5 steps that go through it. And they can, as you are making decisions, they can help you look at what your decisions are and in reference to what the Ohio jail standards are. And if you involve them early, just keep them up to date, show them what you're doing from a programming, from a planning perspective. And then when you get into design, they can choose to come to the meetings or not, but please we find that it's in our best interest as well as counties and theirs is to make sure that they are involved throughout the PAP process. On page 21, it was very clear from John Adams, the Bureau Administrator, is that to expect to receive any deviations or variations to their Ohio jail standards, it's do not count on it. And he was very clear with that. He said it's critical that you follow all the jail standards, and that's where he started talking to me about is that when you renovate jail 1 and jail 2, or if you renovate, you're going to lose some capacity in your facility. There's, as Elliot talked about, you've got to have intercoms in your facility. It is a mandatory thing from that point of view if you go in and renovate the building. So it was just something from, is that the Bureau of Adult Detention is going to have a lot of say over if you renovate the building and at the same time for a new facility. And as like I said, make sure that you include them. So some of the things on page 22 that we were just addressing, we talked about the rated bed capacity, but there's also smoke control, there's natural light, two-way communication, that's intercoms, there's the lighting, the foot candles, which is the lighting levels, but they're also very interested in making sure that you have a good staffing analysis, and you have, as what the sheriff talked earlier, is that you have the right number of staff inside your facility. We like to say is the right staff doing the right things at the right time. And that's something that's important for the overall success of a project.
If I could interrupt.
Yes, sir.
That was one of the times that you were dragged outside of your scope, was when questions were asked about cost savings in a new facility, which I thought was ridiculous, but targeted to muddy the waters, and not that you had studied it, but you had to be corrected of the cost savings in a new facility that the committee had been time and time again told about. And those cost savings had been upwards of $20 million or more. I always go on to $10 million a year cost savings over a 40-year period. It's $400 million, which basically pays your nut on a brand new jail. So now you're dealing with a third of the cost of the jail and the money that it costs you to borrow that money going forward. If again, we were at $550 million, which today we're not, because today we're at $1 billion. Yes, I said $1 billion. So I thought that rather unfair that you had to be dragged outside your 4 corners. I think you did your best to answer it. You were corrected by our experts. You had access to that information, not that you should have been prepared for that question, but that information has been out there in the ether for over 2 years, and actually probably closer to 3 years. So the minute that was asked, I knew what was going on. I knew the trap had been set for you to walk into. And it was a trap because you didn't answer correctly, because you didn't know, because it was outside your scope. And the person that does it for a living happened to be here, thank God. So again, that's yesterday's news. We're on to a different world, but I just wanted to point that out to you that if anybody noticed it, I did.
So I agree with Andy Couples is that if you're looking at staffing for observing inmate for inmate, I agree that the number would go down. And that's one of the ways I answered the question. But I think that when you're looking at it and you need to have staff to offer programs and do spaces that are not in your current facility, I need to be very clear that's not in your current facility, you will need to have staff to do that. So if you're looking at an apple to an apple, I will agree with the statement, but I disagree with the statement that we were wrong, because I don't think that in looking at a staffing comparison, you can compare your existing staff in that existing building versus what they would be doing in a new building, plus all of the new things that you want in a facility. So just a slight clarification from that perspective.
And believe me, I understand that. And to go to the question of delivering hot meals, well, if your kitchen's centrally located, you're going to get hot meals. If it's on the 5th floor and you got to go to the 9th floor and the 3rd floor and whatever, delivering meals, you're not going to get hot meals. So again, building a new facility on a campus site, which the committee voted 12-0 to do, made a lot of sense.
Sure.
And the cost savings within that, I think, justified the 10 million. Again, I always caution myself with going too high, but again, those are gone.
If I may, Chair, ask just a quick question again. On page 22, which we're on, likely rated bed capacity reduction, I know I heard you say that there are many different scenarios that causes that, but you do state it as a first bullet there under jail standards. Is there a range, or is it just a statement?
It is a general statement. Again, some programming, conceptual design would need to go into play. And I know that you want an answer, but
I
it
just wanna-
wasn't in our scope of work because.
Right. But you do say it. You do say that likely bed capacity will be reduced.
If you want to maintain how you house your inmates with predominantly in cells, you do have a couple areas that are dorm style. For an example, like where the kitchen used to be, as an example. If you want to maintain 2-bed cells, unless you add cells in other areas of the facility, there will be a likely bed reduction. What that number is, for an example, Elliot talked about moving all the mechanical, all the infrastructure out of some floors. May seem thinking outside the box, but that's what we were looking at. You could move it outside the building, free up that space for extra beds. And so you have to build beds to be able to maintain your capacity at 1880. What that number is, it just gets into a lot of what ifs. Do we create the cup? Do we go to dorm style? Do we go to 4-man cells? I don't know those answers, so sorry, but.
Thought I would try again. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So looking at page 23, as we started looking at the goals and objectives that the steering committee had been looking at. And one of the first things I'd like to compliment the county on, and I would encourage doing even a lot more, is go tour other facilities. Go see what other counties are doing, because many of them have spent years themselves touring facilities of trying to create what is best for them. And, you went to Columbus, you went down to Franklin County, Davidson County down in Nashville, out to San Mateo, as well as down in Raleigh. You went and looked at facilities. Realize, what I always will caution people on this, is that you will learn something every facility you go to. You will learn, we want that. Or it works great for them. It's just we want to do something different. It's not that it's bad, because other counties have different goals and objectives. But if you can go out and you can tour new facilities, they are very different the way jails are designed today than they have been in the past. And there's a lot of different reasons we'll talk about here in a few minutes with that. The steering committee, the 7 goals and objectives that I believe have been presented. I'm sorry, I thought it clicked. Sorry. that these were the 7 goals and objectives that was very clearly delineated in our request for a proposal. And you can see what each one of those were. And from my understanding, talking with different groups, that this was a 12-0 vote on what the goals and objectives were. And they're all good. They're all things that you should be looking at as you move towards a new facility or potentially renovating a facility. But they are things that you should be able to try to accomplish. It's in the best for the staff. It's the best, it's the most efficient, it's the best to try and to offer opportunities for rehabilitation for the inmates, as well as, quite honestly, reducing the recidivism rates across the board. Just some different images of just some of the things that we see in goals and objectives and other normalizing jails of looking at some things. This page is an example of some projects that we have completed. These are all, like I said, DLZ facilities. But, you know, and you can start looking at this and you can see that your jail's different, okay? And, you know, these are items that were successful in other projects, and you can try to overlay those and see what you can look at. You know, I think that is, as you have been working with your architects in the past, is you will hear very much things about evidence-based treatment approaches. What works? What are the opportunities that you can have in your facility? You know, big advocate, the people that spend the longest in your jail are the people that work there. And you must have amenities for your staff. It's a way to help with the recruiting, the retention, and retaining your staff over a long period of time. You will hear, and you know, Councilman, you mentioned it, the whole operational efficiency of your building. Make sure as you're working with your architects and your planners is that they're constantly doing staffing analysis to making sure that you've got the right number and that you can afford all the things that are being talked about. The normalization of spaces. You know, the normalization of spaces is when you start to introduce more natural light, softer materials, softer colors, more amenities for the inmates, bringing the services to the inmates in lieu of taking the inmates to the services. It reduces a lot on staffing and just because of the overall movement. Sustainability, Elliot talked about it. As he said, we used to build jails small, okay? But when we build those jails small, it's harder to maintain them. You've got to have the spaces, like you see in the bottom right-hand corner, where you can get in and you can maintain your facilities. In your new facility, if you build one, there's going to be a plumbing leak. There's going to be something that you need to fix at some point in time over the years, and make sure you provide the spaces such that you can get to those things. It's all very important things in new jails. So what we looked at is to meet all of those goals, those 3 things, is that you would need to renovate the building. We just can't go in and paint it. We can't replace the light fixtures and that be it. And in doing so, you're going to have construction over multiple years. We don't have the opportunity to take 1,700 inmates, move them to another facility for whatever the duration of construction is, go in and completely renovate the jail, and then move everybody back in. It's not how this works in these projects. You know, your facilities were designed to control the inmates and really control them in custody. And today we're doing more than just controlling them. You know, my first internship 35 years ago, my father, until he passed away in 2018, he challenged me more than any client, any other architect ever did, is of understanding and appreciating why we do what we do in jail design. And I used to tell him all the time is that if we don't change something, we can't build them big enough. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to do your goals and objectives in designs to try and make a difference for the inmates and the staff, and the whole goal is to rehabilitate them and to reduce the recidivism. So, and if you're looking at your existing jails, we're trying to repurpose them to be designed something that they weren't originally designed for. And in doing that, it's a lot of work. And when you renovate a building, and we've renovated jails, we've renovated and expanded jails, okay? We understand that, but there's always compromises. You know, you may say, I want to do this, And your architect goes, well, you can do 80% of that. And there's compromises that you have to go through. And again, just on this is we believe that there would need to be likely extra square footage to be able to meet your goals. So moving on to page 29, and this is really getting into our opinion with just the last few pages here, is I mentioned the National Institute of Correction earlier, and it's something that if you take anything away from our presentation today, I would take down the information about the NIC, because it is all free information. It's free as far as they will help you as much as anyone, but it's a resource to help you design a jail and to help plan a jail. I know the architects you're working with, they're fantastic. They're friends of ours and they do quality work, and they're going to be following what the NIC does as well. But there's just things on this page that we've talked about extensively, but I would just always tell you to reach out to NIC.
Could you just get to your conclusion?
Sure.
Because I sense there are questions, and we do
Sure.
have a hard 3 o'clock.
Okay, so is we look on this, we look at the criteria, the 3 questions. Can you renovate? Can you get it to building code, building and Ohio jail standards? And can you renovate to meet your goals and objectives? And we believe that our determination, our professional opinion, is that the most reasonable solution is to replace the existing jails. So with that, you can see some of the things here, why replace. We've talked about it very much. You can see on page 32, what was originally a cell with 1 bunk is now 2 bunks. But I think that just a couple last things to go through this is there was a question that was asked is, if we just do some ongoing maintenance, replace the things that just absolutely need to be replaced. Don't go in and do a lot of the don't do the goals and objectives. Let's see what we can do to get it, just keep it useful. We believe that that's a 5 to 8 year period. But I will mention that you do need to still spend money on the building. Okay? You must spend money on the building. It's no different than if you have a car, you must replace the oil. Okay? And there's certain things that you have to do in any building. So I think that one of the very last thing we'll say is on page 34 is on the left is one of your examples of a typical housing unit. They're not all like this, but it's very typical of where you've got your day room space, you got all the cells around, you've got windows in the cells to give them the natural light, and then on the right-hand side is something that is a lot of the facilities you've been through. It's just a difference in how we design jails. I mean, just look at the amount of natural light that's on the right versus on the left. And to be able to just do that single thing in your existing jail 1 and 2, just that is just not probable. And I think that just in looking at it, we looked at this very clearly from an independent point of view. We did not know the answer by any means whatsoever when we started the process, but we believe our professional opinion is the correct opinion that we have.
Thank you. So your review basically comes to the same conclusion that the committee came to in 2020 when they voted 12-0 to move forward on a new jail after hearing every possible scenario on Jail 1 and Jail 2, and that conclusion was 2020 until mysteriously in 2022 they needed more information. Were you aware that there was another independent review of the jail? Were you made aware of that?
We were given a lot of information from the Public Works.
No, from anybody from the administration or the prosecutor's office, the availability of more information on our jail and what's wrong with it?
I'm not sure specifically what you mean.
Was that shared with you at all?
Well, I mean, we had the reports from Osborne, K2M, Rosser.
Okay, no, this was born out of something else. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I just found out about it last week myself. Questions, Mr. Miller?
Yeah, just a couple technical items on page 7. Number 1 is what is biophilic design, and number 2, it says bed rated capacity and CUP. What is CUP?
CUP is the central utility plant. We just commonly refer to it, as a CUP. Central utility plant, that means, for an example, in your existing facility, you have air handlers boilers, water heaters on different levels of the facility. A central utility plan is you take all of that stuff and you put it, or the majority of it, you put it in one location outside of the secure perimeter. Okay, biophilic design has a lot to do with different types of lighting that's in a space. It will respond to different moods of the day. It will change with different light levels, different colors. It's all about the mindset, the psychological aspect of design.
Thank you.
You see it very common in mental health institutions. It sincerely makes a difference in anyone's life.
Through the chair, very briefly, so as far as jail 1 and jail 2, one of the jails is obviously a much newer facility. You didn't see any substantial reason why the second jail could be renovated while getting rid of the first jail or anything like that, or if they both substantially require work?
Both will require some amounts of work. Both of them are lacking in some of the security electronics and intercom information communications back and forth. Jail 2 also needs to have its roof replaced sooner rather than later. But there are various aspects. Jail 1, obviously, as you guys are well aware of, is 46 years old versus jail 2, and it has the bulk of what needs to be taken care of. But long term, jail 1 is the one that needs addressed more so in terms of its needs right now.
And the committee did go through all of that, and to bifurcate the jails into one and a new one and keep that one was absolutely dismissed in 2020. So again, I don't want people to, that'll be the new thing. If this were still alive and breathing, that would have been the new question asked for another month delay. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, the current design of jails 1 and 2, specifically with regard to the several floors that comprise it, do you have an opinion whether this is inherently unsafe under today's standards, and if Ohio Department of Recreation or Corrections, Recreation would even approve us maintaining such a design under today's standards?
So your current facility, why it's 10 and 9 levels is because it was built in a downtown urban environment. And, you don't have 30 acres or 20 acres or 40 acres, whatever the number is, to build a jail downtown Cleveland. Okay, it's the reality of that. I think that they would, not speaking for the Bureau of Adult Detention by any means, but I think that they would look at a facility that's 1 level or 2 levels, maybe 3 levels, of being more efficient than a high-rise facility like what you would have. But that would be very specific discussions you'd have to have. Franklin County, I know it's been discussed all the time, it's a 2 operational level facility, okay? Parts of it is just 1, but that's more for the kitchen, the warehouse, the laundry, the facility maintenance area, a little bit of admin, but the rest of the facility is 2 operational levels.
Would the state have to come in and approve any kind of renovation of the existing jail?
Oh, 100%. If you go to the one page where I talked about the planning approval process, which is page 20, there's a 5-step where the first thing that they do is they approve your programming, your functional and your operational programming, and then they approve an overall design. And with that overall design, from a schematic design point of view, is they're really looking at the requirements for like square footages. Are cells the right size? Do you have the right amount of daylighting? They ask you to do a lot of studies to prove to them that you have that. Then there's 2 other phases of design. One's called design development. It's just that you develop the design further. And then there's construction documents, which I really refer to it as that's what the contractors need to go bid the project. It's all the details. They have construction alterations. What that means is that they will walk through your building during construction to make sure that you're meeting all the requirements. And then they have an approval process for your transition, your plan, your program, or your staffing as you move into your new facility. And it's something you must have approval on each phase.
So would they approve a facility that loses beds and doesn't even meet the requirements of that 80% or the capacity? How would they ever approve something? We would have to add space, as you said, even to get through those standards.
They would look at what your rated bed capacity is now. They would also look at how many inmates you currently have, and they would encourage you to make sure that you've got capacity to house the inmates that you have.
Yeah, which is impossible, cost prohibitive. And this natural light, what do we do, knock out walls in the jail? I mean, that just doesn't even add up.
You do have lighting, you do have natural light, but some of your goals and objectives, you want more than just the minimum standards. So,
Thank you.
We all done? Well, yep.
Follow up on that so that we're clear. Are you saying that the rehabilitation of the existing jail can meet the state standards? That if they came in and saw we're still in the tower and what is there, and we did our best to renovate, but we lost beds, how would we meet the standards? I mean, are we talking about adding on to that building or taking out certain areas that aren't now having beds? How can, not only would we renovate to make it safe, but how would we meet the capacity of beds?
whether you're renovating or building new, they are going to be very interested in how many beds you do build, because they want to make sure that you can meet what your average daily population is, as well as what you're projecting into the future. They won't let you build a jail that you have less beds than how many inmates you have, though.
Or they let you renovate a jail that you can't meet the capacity. I mean, building a jail, you can build it and know that what you want and how many beds, but this, we're talking about renovating.
So there's other solutions that they would ask. They would say, are you planning on sending inmates to other counties? That's an option. You know, there's not every county that has jail bed needs does it in addition. Some will say, we've got to send X number of inmates to other counties, and we will pay for that in lieu of doing it in addition. So there's other solutions to just meeting your own needs.
The question's out the window now because this is a dead project. So we look forward to the brilliance of the next executive to save us and build a $550 million facility that we now know is going to cost $1 billion. And I'm hearing through the grapevine and the leaky pipes in the Justice Center that some people are floating building a high-rise jail again. I will caution anybody. Again, the committee went through that, which is why we ended up with a campus-type atmosphere. There's reason behind the madness. And to build a high-rise facility, you're just going back into the same dungeon-esque type situation that we have now. And anybody, and mark my words, I won't be around for it, but anybody that floats that is floating it because they're scared of the cost of what they've cost this county so far. Anybody that floats a high-rise jail from today on is only doing it trying to save money. And I'm not so certain you'd even save money with a high-rise jail. You think you're going to save money on a 4-acre lot as opposed to a 20-acre lot, but then you're basically telling the world you don't give a damn about the lives that are inside that facility. And unfortunately, I think that's where we are today, stuck with a 47-year-old jail, a jail 2 that's antiquated at best, a courthouse and justice facilities that are ADA non-compliant. We have our backs against the wall, and we did our best to correct the situation, and we are now where we're at because of the lots thrown by others, not us. So, gentlemen, I thank you for your efforts today.
Mr. Chairman.
I found your initial report interesting and at times, well, interesting. And I know this was difficult because I think it's rare that you come into a committee, in that committee or this committee, having to stress the fact that you weren't strong-armed in any way to tell the truth. And that jumped out at me, that you had to let the world know that, because obviously the politics of dancing in Cuyahoga County is on the streets. That tells me that you saw clearly there were some lines drawn in the sand, and you would have been correct in noticing that. So you had to walk a fine line, and I appreciate the fact that you did the best that you could with what you were given, although I think you were given an abundance of information from 2014 on that pointed in one direction, that correctly was voted in 2020 to be the direction of the county forward for a new jail, that mysteriously in 2022, people just didn't get it. Well, the taxpayers are now going to get it to the tune of $450 million extra dollars because of those questions. And that's just that. Mr. Miller, we've got to go.
Yes, just regarding the question of a high-rise jail, I could not agree with you more. Not only is it inhumane, but you're just not going to save any money. It's operationally much more costly to operate, and even if you were to save anything on the construction, you would more than lose it on the operation. It's just not a good idea.
Well, again, thank you. We had a great plan going forward. We had financing going forward. We had land going forward. We had the right plan going forward, and now we don't. So
Mr.
again,
Chair.
I wait for the brilliance of the new executive to take us through this. Yes?
Thank you so much of reminding us of that. We're on our way to get out of a situation where we have to not only maintain a decrepit high-rise, but
We
the
have to-
potential of building another one with some encouragement to the executive candidates that perhaps we should all wait for them to come into office, because now we're going to be stuck with a very tragic situation.
Well, there won't be any flowers on their desk January 1st. There's going to be $1 billion bill. Thank you.